Just wait for me. I'll be right there. Hang on one second.
God.
I'm going to walk right over. I'm
Block the
literally
door.
walking into the next studio. Hang on.
Oh my gosh! You're not supposed to tell people. It's supposed to be a surprise.
Well, this
You
is
can't
a
even get
surprise.
that
Walking.
right.
No, this is
Okay.
how close I am to you.
Make sure the lighting is really, shadowy.
Yeah, make it shadowy.
He's a shadowy figure.
By the way, what did you put it low on purpose?
Yeah, I wanted it really shadowy, like a dark figure who enters through the. So you moving here? Like, what's going on? I mean, have you gotten your mail forwarded here?
Oh, gee.
Really?
Well, how about welcome to D.C.? It's great to see you.
Well, I saw your sensei, by the way, walking around the makeup room. I took him down with one roundhouse kick. He's down like Jello in a pool.
Okay, it's not my sensei. Now, can I show everybody what's...
Oh, get out of my pen. Don't take my folders.
No, you have your...
I went to law school. I have my folders, okay? I don't want you to disrupt my...
I come to D.C., I don't get the big studio with the great background and the Capitol behind me.
So you wanted to be treated like the king of all media, both in New York and in our humble, low-ceiling studio. It is a small studio, but there are those who love it. Okay, Hannity? So
right, let me ask you a question, because you're a lawyer. I am 35 weeks from tonight. Results will be flying in.
Big night.
I cannot believe that every single case has fallen apart, no corroboration. And from day one, I believe her without hearing even any evidence. And now that it comes in, nobody's saying, you know what? Maybe we rush to judgment. Do they not care?
No, they will never apologize. They never apologize. They just keep going, and they look for other smears. But the smear machine, I'm going to talk about this in a moment with these two academics who are coming on. Yeah. The smear machine is run dry. So now they're moving to, his temperament. He had 200 great opinions on the D.C. Circuit. He has no temperament issues.
How is one supposed to act if you're accused of in high school of having drugged systematically women and had lines of boys ganging up to rape women? It is so slanderous without evidence.
Yeah, well, we need to change. Trump was right today. We need to change the defamation laws in this country.
I'm done taking over your show.
All right.
I'm out of here. I only get paid for an hour.
Okay, go talk to your sensei. All right.
I will.
Bye.
All right, see you.
All right. He's going to go out that door.
Stuck.
Oh, no, he can't get out.
I can't get out.
All right. No, he's going to just sit there. Welcome to Washington. I'm Laura Ingraham, and this is the Ingraham Angle. At this hour, Fox News can report that the FBI supplemental report on Judge Brett Kavanaugh could be delivered to the White House as soon as tomorrow. And this breaking just moments ago, Fox's John Roberts has obtained a letter from Christine Ford's ex-boyfriend alleging she never told him of the alleged assault. Ford coached her friend on taking a polygraph, and she flew frequently without ever expressing any fear of flying. Oh, wow. We'll break that all down with you and the latest with Joe DeGeneva, Andy McCarthy, and a lot more. Plus, the anti-Trump and Kavanaugh forces have resorted to a number of increasingly hostile acts targeting lawmakers just over the past 24 hours. Senator Tom Cotton is here. I think it's the first appearance on the Ingraham Angle, is here to react. But first, academic resistance to Kavanaugh. That's the focus of tonight's angle. The left is moving in lockstep in their sleazy effort to obliterate not only the Supreme Court confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh, but the man himself. We've seen Soros-funded activists confronting senators in elevators to stall Kavanaugh's confirmation, choreographed impromptu press conferences and rallies, Hollywood stars staging their tedious walkouts to urge the Senate to vote against Kavanaugh. And now academia has engaged, so watch out. A provost distinguished professor at Georgetown University, her name is Carol Christine Fair, and she's acting everything but fair, tweeted this last weekend, "Look at this chorus of entitled white men justifying a serial rapist's arrogated entitlement. All of them deserve miserable deaths while feminists laugh as they take their last gasps. Bonus. We castrate their corpses and feed them to swine? Yes." So no longer content to indoctrinate our children, academic liberals like Fair are now advocating violence against conservatives. When she was exposed by Campus Reform, Professor Fair accused them of bullying her. Now, she's a damsel in distress. I thought they could take care of themselves. In a blog post, she insisted, My choice of words is intended to make you uncomfortable because I and tens of millions of women in this country are uncomfortable with the ongoing war on our bodies, our lives, and our fundamental freedoms. So help me out here. Men should have their genitals mutilated, then fed to animals to give her control over her body? She's going to have to tell me how that'll work. Now, what's shocking, though, is that Georgetown is standing by this left-wing nutbag. Are these the Jesuit Catholic values the university is so proud of? Well, they claim her comments were private and not the views of Georgetown. But this is a woman who on social media has called Trump supporters magats, get it, and Trump pansies. Can you imagine if a conservative academic, if there are any, referred to Democratic politician supporters as simians or anyone for that matter as a monkey? Someone owes Roseanne an apology. This dean, check it out, is a true lefty hater.
Trump, and I won't use the preface president, what Trump has done largely under the influence of Israel has done everything it can to sabotage this Iran agreement.
We had to blur out some of those stickers on her laptop. She can't even keep those clean. And I'm sure Trump is losing sleep over the fact that she's not calling him President Trump. All right, but just as a comparison, at Catholic University, also in D.C., Dean Will Rainford had the nerve to question Christine Ford's credibility on Twitter. He wrote, "Swetnick is 55 years old. Kavanaugh is 52 years old. Since when do senior girls hang out with freshman boys? If it happened when Kavanaugh was a senior, Swetnick was an adult drinking with and by her admission having sex with underage boys. In another universe, he would be the victim and she the perp." Well, for that completely kind of fact-based opinion, Dean Rainford was suspended by Catholic U for the semester and forced to write an apology. And he didn't even threaten anybody's life, okay? By the way, a suspension, though, wasn't good enough. Yesterday, angry protesters stormed the university demanding that the dean resign. Liberals have infested every corner of universities, from the classroom to the administration building. We know that by now. And emboldened, they operate according to their own resistance rulebook. At least 20 Yale University professors shut down classes. It was last week, I guess, so that law students could protest Kavanaugh's hearings both in D.C. and on campus. To express their students wore black and staged sit-ins. How original. So undergrads later marched across campus to express their outrage. Now, remember, Kavanaugh is a Yale alum, so this is particularly pathetic.
She was very emotional during her opening statement, and to be confronted with the first thing that Senator Grassley said was he feels equally for Brett Kavanaugh, her alleged perpetrator, as he feels for Dr. Ford, who has received death threats.
And she feels like unable to be safe even in her own home and really wants there to be an extra way for people to exit. I find that to be really striking. This happened to her decades ago, and she's still feeling the real effects of it today.
$75,000 a year for tuition at Yale University. Oh, my. And at Harvard University, yesterday, Associate Dean Catherine Claypool announced that Brett Kavanaugh will no longer be teaching a course that he's taught in the past at the school. Claypool claims that Kavanaugh, quote, can no longer commit to his course on the Supreme Court. Well, no wonder. This is the university that last year, months after Trump's election, hosted a resistance school featuring leftist activists and agitators.
The origin of the resistance school lies in the election on November 8th of 2016. Of the 45th president of the United States.
Like so many of you, my friends and I woke up on November 9th just devastated.
Schools are places for intellectual exchange, for social transformation, and yes, when necessary, for political resistance.
$80,000 a year? What is it at Harvard? Well, true to form, students and alumni have been urging Harvard Law School to rescind Kavanaugh's teaching appointment since the Christine Ford allegations leaked. Hundreds of Harvard graduates signed a petition demanding that Harvard cut ties with Kavanaugh. In other words, the mob got their way. For Yale and Harvard and even Dean Unfair, who we talked about earlier, what happened to this principle of innocent until proven guilty? I thought the liberals really believed in that. That's totally out the window. Given the shaky state of these accusations against Kavanaugh and the daily erosion of the credibility of the accusers, why are law schools of all places rushing to judgment against their own alumnus without any substantiating evidence or witnesses? It's amazing. If they really wanted to teach their law students an important lesson, it might be this. Put your political prejudice aside. Exercise a bit of restraint and withhold judgment until all the evidence and the facts are in. Oh, and justice should still be blind, not political. And that's the angle. Joining me now is Alan Lichtman from American University and Jamil Jaffer from George Mason. Alan, great to have you both here. This liberal professor is literally calling for violence against Republican senators. Your thoughts on this? And the university is backing her. Would they do the same thing if a conservative or kind of middle-of-the-road Republican professor were advocating violence against any minority group?
I can only speak for myself and my university. I've been teaching for 45 years at American University. Nobody but nobody has ever advocated violence against anyone.
What do you think about this professor? It's like a code. You can't comment on other professors? What do you think about that?
I don't think anyone should be advocating violence, but I'm astonished to hear you talk about the need for facts and truth in the age of Donald Trump. We have a president who is documented to have issued over 4,000 lies.
Documented by whom?
Documented by the Washington Post.
Okay. So
I know it has to be wrong because Alan, it isn't a right-winger. You just told us you've got to respect. Let me finish.
But no, we know that
you spoke for 5 minutes.
Right. It's actually like when you have the Lichtman angle, you can speak for as long as you want.
Well,
so
then why are you having me here if you want me to speak?
Well, don't play that game. I'm trying to direct the conversation because we do have limited time.
Oh, you don't want to hear about Donald Trump's lies? Of course not.
The conversation is about why on college campuses is there such a monolith against Donald Trump? How many conservative professors at American University? Name three.
We do not put litmus tests on our professors. I do not ask.
You can't name because you know there aren't any.
That's nonsense. I do not ask for the politics. You put politics on professors. We don't at American University. Okay. I teach a course in American conservatism. I wrote a book on American conservatism.
So you don't think it matters?
I've had thousands upon thousands of students over 45 years, not a single complaint. And let me say, you're talking about the case for the accusers falling apart. What about how the Brett Kavanaugh has fallen apart in the age of truth?
Do you think you should lose your job at AU if you have one allegation against you that's not substantiated? Should you lose it?
I think it should be investigated and checked.
Should you lose a deanship if one person makes an allegation?
Without any investigation.
You would be outraged if this were happening to a liberal justice like Sotomayor.
This is not what's happening to Brett Kavanaugh.
You would be outraged, and there'd be torches at AU across the circle, and they would say, "How could you do this to Sotomayor?"
You have no idea.
Yes, I do. I used to live about a block from AU, and I ran at the track every day.
You know all about American University.
I do. I met a lot of great students.
This is the age of facts, right-wing facts. You happen to live near American University. I've taught there for 45 years.
We got to get Jamil
in here. But you know more about American University than I do.
Because you teach doesn't mean that you necessarily think. Because you said that Donald Trump is an autocrat. Have you not said that on multiple occasions?
Absolutely.
Okay. That you lose all credibility in saying that. Go ahead, Jamil.
Because you don't believe that?
No, because it's ridiculous. Did you live in the former Soviet Union?
Let me defend it.
I did. Go ahead, Jamil.
He loves autocrats. He wants to be an autocrat.
You're better
he fell in love with Kim Jong-un,
doing this
the most
doesn't make your point
dictator on the planet.
He fell in love with him. No, he did a deal. He did a deal just like a lot of presidents.
No deal.
Really?
There's no deal.
Have we ever done a deal with Saudi Arabia, Alan?
There's no deal.
Ever done a deal with Saudi Arabia?
Jong-un.
You know we have. Go ahead.
None.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's a figment.
Go ahead.
Well, look, Laura, look. Just because you have the right to say something doesn't mean you should, right? This professor's out there. She obviously has a concern with what's going on the Hill and with Judge Kavanaugh. That's fine. She's allowed to have her concerns. Talk about people being murdered, being castrated. People always talk about the tone in Washington and the tone in the country and all these beefs. They have to point the finger at the president, sometimes correctly, for changing the tone in the country. And yet here we are, and it's hard. You can't be critical of Professor Fair because she's allowed to use that tone.
I am critical of her.
Okay, well,
you're
good.
wrong. I am critical. I just criticized her.
You were. That's to be
Thank
fair.
you.
I think that we have a situation on campus. I want to focus on that.
Sure.
Where conservative students do feel like they're under siege. And I know, Alan, you have written some really fascinating stuff, and you are a really good professor. And this is not any type of criticism of your particular teaching. But this was an interesting piece written just a couple months ago, I guess the spring of this year, by Brad Schrober, who's the president of Loyola U's College Republican. He said, and he's a senior, so he could write this for the Baltimore Sun. He said, I've witnessed professors go out of their way to attack Donald Trump, or even conservatives as a whole. And I'm sure these professors will justify their actions as educating students on issues. However, these attacks, which are often very illogical or hypocritical, take students, even those who dislike President Trump, and push them off to the political right. The school is more than willing to invite speakers who've been given leadership awards by the former General Secretary of the Soviet Union, and to give the 2018 commencement speaker spot to a man who said he would have killed Trump had he been in the room when he was born, and yet, to my knowledge, have not brought in a single conservative speaker in my 4 years here. That's really sad for students.
I mean, it's terrible. Look, I can tell you on campus at UCLA back in 1998 when I graduated, I was called a sellout to my race, to my religion, because I happen to be conservative. I happen to talk about my politics on campus. I happen to be in a fraternity. And I was attacked, and I was told that I was in the wrong, and I wasn't allowed to speak on campus because I didn't have that sort of view that the other people expected me to be a liberal because I'm a minority.
Let me respond to this. You know, conservatives have such outrage, and justifiably, when someone speaks hatefully or violently. And yet, I have yet to see conservatives outraged over what the extreme right has been doing in this country. Let me finish.
I'm outraged. Let me say it. I'm outraged.
What are you outraged about?
I'm outraged when the alt-right goes out there and attacks people and criticizes them. I'm completely outraged. But don't tell me that my outrage isn't justified, or that I didn't experience what I experienced.
I never said that.
Okay, so
you're putting words in my mouth. Let me finish.
So let's talk about that.
Let's talk real quick, guys.
I didn't interrupt you. You know, and the other way, there's a study that I was about to cite by the Cato Institute, not a left-wing group, which says over 25 years, the amount of murders committed by right-wing terrorists is 7 times higher than that by left-wing terrorists. Why do we hear nothing from you about that? Moreover, there was a course at San Diego State University using my book, The Case for Impeachment, and the right wanted to silence me, wanted to silence my book.
I would never want to silence you.
But it was all over Fox News.
But
it was over.
Right. But I would say, Alan, if you're going to come on, if you're going to come on this show and claim that liberals don't have enough platforms in the United States, they dominate academia. You couldn't name one conservative professor. They dominate entertainment industry. Let me finish. They dominate the entertainment industry. They dominate most churches in the United States. And even when Trump is here, they don't want to defeat him in the substance. They want to defeat him as a person. It's not about Kavanaugh as a judge.
Totally
it's about Kavanaugh as a person.
You've read my books.
Debate the articles.
You know my books are all about the substance.
Right. Well, I'm not talking about your textbooks. It's great to promote your textbooks. We're not talking about it.
Look,
but you're one person.
We academics
you're one
search
person.
for truth.
You know what happens on campuses, and you just don't have credibility.
What happens on campuses? You pull out these isolated examples.
You think Berkeley, what they did to conservatives at Berkeley, is fair? Are you kidding me?
What they did to me at San Diego State wasn't fair either.
You
pull out these isolated examples and apply it to all of academia.
How many conservatives left? All right.
I know you don't check the politics of your faculty. Fine.
But of course not.
But don't.
You shouldn't.
But be honest about what campus politics looks like. Be honest about faculty politics. We've all been there. We've all seen it. The reality is that the vast majority of American universities.
Because we have merit-based hiring and promotion.
Is that it?
That's it.
That's it.
The campuses used to be all conservative. Then they hired liberals on a merit basis.
You know what it is?
There's no affirmative action for liberals.
Conservatives need not apply, or it's self-selective. It's self-selective. It's like. Who wants
to go? It was conservatives who hired us. When I got hired, academia was conservative.
Pipe down. You know, this is my classroom. When people call Trump supporters not deplorables, but Trump pansies and Trump tards. And this is the kind of stuff that's just commonplace on campus. Commonplace.
I've never heard that out of you.
It's so sad for the students because it's better. I was at Dartmouth. I had a lot of liberal professors who were good friends. We had a blast debating issues. It was so much fun. That's what campus is all about. Exchange of real ideas.
I agree with that.
Okay, well, that's good.
We
Let's
have
end
a
on that.
president who calls the press enemies of the people, disgusting,
Hey,
the worst.
Trump's an autocrat. We get it. We're not talking about that topic, but it was a really fun conversation. You're both great together. All right, and it was good to have you on. Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton is here when we return. A lot more to get to on the Ingraham Angle. Huge news night. Other developments on the Christine Ford front. We'll get to all of it. Stay there. The last 24 hours have revealed what can happen when activists turn aggressive. Representative Andy Harris of Maryland was harassed at his congressional office by two pro-pot activists. I thought they were supposed to be calm because of pot. Mitch McConnell was harassed at Reagan National Airport by the same Soros-funded group that cornered poor old Jeff Flake in the congressional elevator. And suspicious packages were sent to the Pentagon, Senator Ted Cruz's Texas campaign office, and the White House. So where's all this leading? To answer that, we're joined by Senator Tom Cotton. Senator, thanks so much for being here. You've been very vocal about this Kavanaugh circus. So how is this political division, the acrimony, now this aggression over the nomination, fueled some of these perhaps increasingly dangerous situations?
Well, Laura, the Democrats will stop at nothing to defeat Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to the Supreme Court. They're not doing that because of the allegations that they've trotted out over the last 2 weeks. They're doing it because they don't want to have a conservative majority on the Supreme Court. And that's why you've seen some of the most outlandish, wild-eyed claims rolled out with immediate demands that he withdraw. He's not withdrawing. We're voting on him. Everybody will have to put their cards on the table before God and country later this week. Brett Kavanaugh will be confirmed because the more we learn, I suspect the FBI investigation will simply corroborate this. His denials are the things that are supported by evidence, not the allegations against him.
Senator, the security in the Senate seems to me to be a bit of an issue when you can have people, clearly this is all orchestrated and planned, they had the cameras all ready to go, and they work for Soros's Center for Democracy, co-executive director, was the one who was shouting most in the beginning. They corner Flake, and Flake's like melting, and he's like, needs a pair of Depends or something. It's not a deal with like two women yelling at him. And he's like, no, don't do. And they're screaming at him. And I don't know if they stood in the elevator, but they couldn't get out of I was like stuck in the elevator. Is this now going to incentivize other such organized protesters to do the same thing? Then they get their moment of viral shame.
Laura, you're right that a lot of these protesters are professional left-wing activists at D.C. community organizing groups or even Democratic staffers. They're yelling and screaming in the hallways. They're stalking senators, not just in the Senate, but at airports and even to their homes. The young staffers in Susan Collins' offices have received death threats and rape threats. They walk around disrupting business in the Senate. This is a result in part of the kind of wild-eyed radical claims that Democrats have made about Brett Kavanaugh from the very beginning. And remember, Laura, it wasn't that long ago when a madman, a former Bernie Sanders supporter, showed up at a baseball field in Alexandria to commit mass murder against congressional Republicans. Thankfully, Capitol Hill police officers were there because Steve Scalise were present, and they were able to neutralize that threat, but not before Steve Scalise was badly wounded and still walks on crutches to this day because of it. So I think some of our Democratic colleagues need to reconsider their rhetoric and the kind of incentives that they're giving to people that, frankly, are a little bit around the bend.
Senator, 3 takeaways from Christine Ford's ex-boyfriend, and again, it's an ex-boyfriend, so you got to take it with a grain of salt. Obtained by Fox News tonight. Blasey Ford helped prepare a friend to take a polygraph test. I don't know if she fancies herself something of an expert in polygraphs, but she had that history. Apparently, she had no fear of flying in small airplanes, a number of trips that he was, I guess, on with her or aware of. And she had no aversion to tight or closed spaces. She claimed that she had become claustrophobic because of this event 36 years ago. There were other comments of a sexual nature that I'd rather not get into, but he was never told about her assault in any way, shape, or form. And Anyway, I don't want to talk about more of the sexual stuff, but there's that out there as well.
Yeah, Laura, so I haven't seen that letter. I only heard you reporting on it earlier. I will say this, I assume the FBI will consider that matter. I also assume the FBI will seek the therapist notes that Ms. Ford cited as corroborating evidence from 2012. Nobody's seen those yet. She refused to turn them over to the Senate Judiciary Committee. What little we do know comes from Washington Post reporting. If anything, it is exculpatory for Brett Kavanaugh. It corroborates his account and creates internal inconsistencies in Ms. Ford's account. So I hope the FBI has had a chance to review those therapist notes as part of their supplemental background check.
Senator, your prediction, will he get confirmed?
Brett Kavanaugh will be confirmed to the Supreme Court later this week. It'll be a majority. I hope that it's a bipartisan majority. I hope many of the senators last week that went over the top in their rhetoric will reconsider what they said, recognize that even though they lost the election, even though a Republican president is appointing a justice of his choice and being confirmed by a Republican majority Senate, that they need, for the long-term health of the Senate and the Supreme Court, to reconsider their rhetoric about the legitimacy of this process. If anything, Chuck Grassley, Mitch McConnell, Donald Trump have bent over backwards to be transparent and provide all the information that's necessary to prove that Brett Kavanaugh is both highly qualified and that there's no corroboration or proof for any of the allegations against him.
Senator Tom Cotton, thanks so much for being with us tonight. And Kavanaugh's accusers and their enablers in the media seem to be having trouble finding one story and sticking to it. First, Kavanaugh was a groper. Then he was a flasher, and then all of a sudden, he was a serial gang rapist or dropped quaaludes and punch bowls. When those stories couldn't stand on their own, Kavanaugh became a partisan hack and a belligerent drunk. And do you know that he actually threw some cubes of the cold stuff on someone in a 1985 bar fight? That makes him cooler, sorry. That's a lot of people are like, that's cool. And now they claim he perjured himself, which is completely false. Here to debate the evolving narrative is Joe DeGenova, former U.S. attorney, and Scott Bolden, National Bar Association PAC president. Joe, let me start with you. Is this anything other than a craven attempt by the Democrats to hold on to this seat?
Well, clearly that's what it is. I mean, the performance by the Democrats on the committee during the hearing and in their public discourse has been rather shameful. But it really doesn't matter to them because it's all about power. I thought that Judge Kavanaugh conducted himself brilliantly during the hearings, and in his statement that he gave, which some of the Democratic senators objected to, where he became angry, and I think legitimately so after having been accused of being a serial rapist in order to protect his own name and that of his wife and his children. I think it was perfectly justifiable. I give him an A+ for his performance. I give the Senate Democrats on the committee a disgraceful F. And it's all about power for them. They lost the election. As Barack Obama said, elections have consequences. We won, you lost, get over it.
Scott.
Wow. Well, I feel just the opposite. I'd give Kavanaugh an F, and I'd give the Democrats at least a B, but maybe an A in regard to how thoughtful they were after the partisan attack. You know, you put that list up there talking about what he was accused of. He's never been accused of being a serial rapist by Ford. And if he was a partisan hack, he was a partisan hack in his testimony. I've never seen, I don't know if anybody else has ever seen, a nominee go after the Democrats and the Clintons out of the blue simply because there's a young woman who says when she was 15, he attacked her. Now, what does that have to do with Democratic politics? They didn't go round up 2 or 3 attackers and say, hey, just say these things. To argue that is to suggest that they're lying. And that's the biggest problem with the GOP, that they're not seeking the truth. They just want Kavanaugh to get on the bench, whether he's qualified or not, whether he's a belligerent drunk or not, or whether he attacked these 3 women.
Let me just say if the belligerent...
And whether he lied about it or not, and whether his temperament is not what it should be because of his presentation.
Let me just say if
those are the reactions you're seeing from the public.
If the sloppy or belligerent drunk standard is going to be now operative in this town, we're going to shut down a lot of trade associations, Senate offices, House offices, and law offices, okay?
Because his own colleagues say that.
All right. We'll get to that. We'll get to more. We got a lot more to get to. While the Democrats obsess over what they claim are inconsistencies in Kavanaugh's testimony, what about the shifting stories from his accusers? One senator is calling for a criminal referral over Julie Swetnick's contradictions. Andy McCarthy will also join these two next.
Okay. After I broke up with her, she basically called me many times, and at one point she basically said, "You will never ever see your unborn child alive, and I wanted, I'm just gonna go over there. I'm gonna kill you guys."
Did she mention ever having been sexually assaulted?
Never once she mentioned that to me. And we used to talk about it, just about everything, and she never once mentioned that at all. I really don't believe her. No one knows better. No one knows Julie Swetnick better than me.
Well, that was the ex-boyfriend of Kavanaugh accuser Julie Swetnick, laying out the case for why she's an unreliable witness. That was, of course, following her disastrous interview with NBC that included inconsistencies with her sworn affidavit at almost every turn. Well, now Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy is calling for a criminal referral over what he says is a signed false affidavit sent to the Senate by her attorney, Michael Avenatti. Fox News contributor and former U.S. Attorney Andy McCarthy joins us to discuss. Also back with us, Joe DeGeneva and Scott Bolden. Andy, as these allegations continue to unravel, is there any recourse that Kavanaugh or the Senate may have against some of these accusers?
Well, I think, Laura, this being more importantly than anything else a political process, if this gives them some steam behind them to get this thing to a vote and get him confirmed, that would be the best thing that could happen. They could certainly refer these matters to the FBI and the Justice Department and ask them to be investigated. They could ask not only to have these statements investigated, but to find out whether she was put up to this to make the kind of statements that she made and make the kind of case that she made. But I would think the most important thing here, the imperative, is to get this process done and get this guy voted on.
Well, the new allegations against Christine Ford, to all of you, include that she coached at least one person on a polygraph and a number of other inconsistencies about her statement. And he said she never mentioned this sexual assault to him. And other things about her sexual history, which I don't really want to get into. I'm not going to read that full screen.
Well, so what? So what? So what that she was inconsistent with the affidavit? That's not going to get her prosecuted or investigated. So what that she's got a boyfriend? She has a boyfriend who has an axe to grind who says they talked about everything. I don't know what he gets out of it. Maybe he should be investigated for why he's on TV as a boyfriend, not a husband, and say they talked about everything. Are you kidding me?
Okay, so what you're saying is that someone can accuse an individual up for a big job with impunity, with an allegation unsubstantiated. You sign an affidavit, then you go on and give interviews because you're all heady and you have a head full of steam. Then you have inconsistencies, and it should be out. No big deal.
Well, you certainly can't be criminally
no big deal.
Well, you can't be criminally prosecuted
if there's intent to deceive the Senate.
I think that what Andy said is important to follow up on. Let's remember what this is. This is a confirmation process for the United States Supreme Court. This woman has thrown out allegations which she has sworn under penalty of perjury are true and submitted it to the committee doing the confirmation. When this is over and he is confirmed, Chairman Grassley should refer that to the Justice Department for a federal grand jury, and she should be given a chance to come before that grand jury and explain herself. And there's a reason for that. You have to make people understand that you can't send false information to a United States Senate committee in the middle of a process that is important to our constitutional system. She should be investigated. Ms. Swetnick should be investigated and, if necessary, charged with the crime of submitting a false statement to the Senate. We have to do that to protect the system.
Andy, my source tonight tells me that the Mark Judge interview, which went on for several hours, went very well. It was extremely thorough, and the FBI seemed fairly pleased with his cooperation. That's all I know, but that's a very reliable source. What about that? Do you need to make people pay for dragging the country through this, and it's lying to a government body?
Well, I think, number one, you absolutely have to do that if you have evidence that people lied, because what happened here should never happen. And I think a lot of what happened here is about the interim effect of what was done, not only to Kavanaugh, but to people around Kavanaugh. I think what they're trying to do is make an example of him. And what has to be made is a counterexample that if you pervert a process like this, if you provide false information to a Senate committee, as Joe said, you need to be prosecuted. And I would go a step further and say, if there were people behind you who put you up to it, they need to be investigated as well.
Well, yeah, that means donors, any emails that have been deleted or texts that have been deleted, people you've consulted
lawyers.
with. Lawyers, lawyers who are not acting as lawyers but as activists. Yeah, that attorney-client privilege will melt away pretty fast if it's a crime fraud exception. We all know that. We're out of time, guys. Sorry, I'm so sorry. I'd love to have you on the whole hour.
Disagreement doesn't mean you can prove they're lying.
It's hard to prove.
It's not going to go anywhere.
You can't lie.
That's why they call it an investigation.
That's why God made grand juries.
Exactly.
That's right.
All right.
That's why we're investigating Kavanaugh.
All right, Senate Democrats are feeling the heat from both sides now. This is a fun panel.
That's next.
As Kavanaugh accusations have begun to backfire. Ed Henry has a live report. New details next. As poll numbers come in from West Virginia and North Dakota, Senate Democrats are feeling the political pressure to vote for Kavanaugh. For more, we're joined by Fox News Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry. Ed.
Laura, great to see you. The breaking news tonight, as you noted, is that we're hearing the FBI could give this final report to the White House as soon as tomorrow. That may explain why the Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell told colleagues, expect this report soon. They'll have a couple days to review it, and then he's planning an up or down vote by the end of this week. Also new tonight, Dr. Ford's legal team wrote to the FBI demanding she get to talk. We're hearing, though, from law enforcement sources that she may not be called in by the FBI because she's already spoken to the Senate Judiciary Committee. And so they can rely on those hours of sworn testimony. They'll only reach out to her if something is corroborated. Absent that, McConnell's moving forward with a vote on Kavanaugh, which led Democratic leader Chuck Schumer to lash out today, complaining this is moving too fast, which may have something to do with the fact that Democrats are nervous about how this is playing out in some close Senate races. Heidi Heitkamp, who's undecided in North Dakota, now trailing her Republican opponent, listen to this, by 10 points. In a poll by the Conservative Judicial Crisis Network, found 56% of North Dakotans want Kavanaugh confirmed. In West Virginia, Democrat Joe Manchin has to deal with the fact that the same conservative poll found 58% of voters in his state want a yes on Kavanaugh. And pay attention to New Jersey, where Republican Bob Hugin has pulled to within 2 points of Democrat Bob Menendez. Now, the Republican had announced his support for Kavanaugh. He pulled it back after the initial allegations, now says he's going to wait for a final decision when the FBI probe ends. So everyone's focused on undecided Republicans like Collins, Flake, Murkowski, but there are some Democrats tonight who are very much on the griddle as well, Laura.
Thank you so much, Ed. And joining us live from New York City is Bob Hugin. He's here to tell us about his race against incumbent Senator Bob Menendez. Remember, he was indicted on a number of charges. A lot of ethical issues continue to hang over Menendez. But Bob, I appreciate you joining us. How much weight do you think this Kavanaugh fight could impact the midterms in even blue states like yours in New Jersey?
Well, Laura, first of all, great to be with you tonight. It's exciting times in New Jersey. I think people are paying close attention to this. They want a process that's fair, not one that's embarrassed us all. So I think we're really hopeful we'll get to the bottom of this. I think the FBI investigation is important, that we get all the information. But once we get that information, it's time to come to judgment and make a decision for the American people.
Now, the poll, there's this, I guess, this Stockton University poll that's fairly reputable, has the race with Senator Menendez at just a 2-point deficit for you. A lot of people are shocked by that, but people who I know who've been following you in Jersey aren't shocked about it at all because Menendez has like a 54% unfavorability rating, and still all the stuff going on with what happened with the indictment, and then, of course, the Senate Ethics Committee and what they said about his behavior. It's sort of funny to hear him talking about Kavanaugh with everything that he's had his hands on.
It's so embarrassing. You know, Laura, we've done over 400 campaign stops already, events, meeting with New Jerseyans of every location in our state. They want change. They're embarrassed by this guy. He violated federal law, abused the power of his office, disgraced the Senate, embarrassed us all in New Jersey. And on top of that, 25 years in Washington, 16 years with a Democratic president, and New Jersey's dead last. We get the least back from Washington of any state. The people of New Jersey realize we can do so much better. The people of New Jersey deserve so much better. We're going to do better, put the people of New Jersey first, starting in January. So it's really exciting to be in New Jersey. Every day we get more and more positive feedback. Democrats endorsing us. They know people deserve better, and we're going to give them better.
Yeah, it's New Jersey's always the butt of everybody's jokes, but that's usually from people who haven't spent a lot of time in New Jersey. It's a beautiful state, but it has some really bad leadership, ridiculously high taxes. I love Chris Christie. I know some people don't like it, but I like him. But ridiculously high taxes. And I think the McConnell super PAC should be putting money into this race. It's a toss-up now. And this is a race that Republicans can win, so don't just focus on the races that have gotten all the publicity. Bob, we really appreciate you joining us. We'll have you on radio soon. Great to see you tonight.
Great to be with you, Laura. Thanks so much.
Congrats on narrowing that poll with Menendez. That's exciting. Now, what does the Kavanaugh saga tell us about how men will face accusations going forward? Should we be worried as a society, mothers, sisters, wives? An important conversation ahead.